That's easily my favorite part of any meeting. So we have a quorum here with Bob Lyons, Don Knorr, Dan Ramsey, Carrie Schuffner, Carl Stump. It's 6:30 and we can begin.
All right, I'll call the Public Works Committee meeting to order then. We have a quorum, and our first item of business on the agenda is the minutes of July 25th.
Ramsey will move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Is that because a couple of people weren't at the last meeting? I'll second the motion.
I'll second it. Okay.
We got a second from one or the other. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved.
And I'll just say I wasn't at the meeting, so I will abstain.
Okay,
Likewise, Don.
All right, so I'll record it as 3:02. Carrie and Don abstain. All right, we squeaked that one through. That was the tough one, though. So
yeah, well,
now we're on to the easy stuff.
all right, number 2 is Parmenter Street reconstruction preliminary design issues. And Sean, you want to kind of walk through the memo that you submitted
Sure.
along with this? And
I'll give you the high-level view, and Krista, our designer from MSA, is here tonight with us as well. And because Packet Day last Thursday was a bit of a flurry in my office, if or to the degree I got stuff wrong, Krista can straighten us out. But for the most part, there's a design issue that affects, to some degree, the profile, potentially the cross-section, and it all hinges on retaining walls. You know, we had talked about that, I want to say a month or so ago. Nope, May 9th, where we had some guidance. And part of what we were looking into is to look into not putting the sidewalk below the curb line, but keeping the sidewalk as is normal above the curb line and draining into the street. But on the back side of that, towards the right-of-way line, then that requires taller retaining walls. And along part of Bergstrom, there's already a retaining wall. So then the question was, well, do we tear that out and build one big retaining wall, or terrace that wall so that we can keep their existing one and add our wall on top of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It might make more sense when we get to a picture. So MSA worked up a couple of options for us with associated cost implications. And one of those options, for the most part, I'll say, was, to maintain a 6-foot terrace, which then puts the wall a little bit outside the right-of-way. And it's a stepped wall. So again, there's sort of a wall and then a flat area and then another wall going up on top of that. And that affords a little bit of room for landscaping, and it prevents just one, like 9-foot wall instead of 2 4-foot walls. Option 2 massaged that to some degree. It still had a normal terrace width. It still had 2 stepped walls, but what it did was tried to get the southbound lanes, the ones on the west side of the road, a little bit lower than the northbound lanes so that it could decrease the wall height. And it reduced the cost a little bit. In my opinion, my estimation of what I had, and this is where we probably want to get into discussion, it didn't seem worth it to me to introduce the, I'll say, squirreliness of the cross section for the cost and the reduced wall height that it afforded us. But that's where we want to get your input as the committee so that MSA can work towards final design and real estate and everything that goes with it. Anything in terms of background, Krista, that I've glossed over or outright missed here?
No, I think that's the general information. I would want to add that, the cost we're showing there is really just like the wall cost itself. It doesn't include like what the effects would be on like the overall, excavation quantities and pricing for that sort of element. It really is just, the installed wall cost that's representing.
Okay, yeah, fair point. So the differential cost may be a little bit more than
Right.
that.
Right.
Um, and part of what I was thinking, and I don't think the odds are really high that we'll eventually convert that median to additional travel lanes, but that's been our design intent throughout. And by building the northbound lanes and the southbound lanes at different elevations, it just gets a little bit harder to pull that off in the future. It's not quite as straightforward how to do that. But it can be done. So if the committee really wants. And then the other question was, well, what do we do about a wall that's starting to go beyond the 90-foot right of way? I don't really favor a permanent easement, for the wall. I'd like to keep it in the right of way if we can, but that would mean reducing terrace widths from 6 feet, which is really our desirable minimum for tree health. And we could squeeze it a little bit out of both sides, maybe by shifting the reference line over and then transitioning further north. But that's something else we'll have to talk about here.
Sean, for what distance would you have to squeeze the terrace down a little bit?
Well, if we don't change the road alignment, I think it really would be most affected just by the walls. And that's kind of in 2 sections, over by REA and then up again by Bergstrom. Because it's pretty easy to transition sidewalk.
Is there a significant impact on tree health if you have a 5-foot terrace as opposed to a 6-foot?
That's a good question for Mark Wagner or Tony Crom, tree people. And they'd probably say, well, it depends what kind of tree it is.
Well, they would have to determine the tree to fit the median.
Yeah, we could plan for that.
I think probably, if we put in some smaller species that don't need as much. I mean, heck, University Avenue doesn't have as many as it used to, some trees in a 4-foot terrace. So it's not that it can't be done, it's just harder. I don't know if there are any particular drawings you wanted to reference as we're discussing these options. Pop over to them. So there's the wall that's kind of along REA, I'll call it. And then there's the driveway, of course. And then it goes up along Bergstrom. I don't know if that's showing up on your screens. Okay, I can always zoom in. On mine, it's tiny. But sort of know where it is. And then let me just close down a little bit where the walls kind of kick in on these cross sections. Do I have the right names?
Yep, there you are with the stepped wall.
Here, okay.
Mhm.
So you can see this existing wall by Bergstrom's, and then we'd have a flat-ish area before we built our wall to get up to the sidewalk to make it higher than the curb. So this will all drain in towards the street like is normal instead of going into Bergstrom's parking lot, but we'll just have a look of their wall and our wall. And you can see where it says 42.5 feet from the reference line. That's laterally how far over to the west it is from the reference line. But we only have 41.5 feet to work in. If I understand that right, Kristen?
Yeah.
That's right.
What,
Okay.
Sean, becomes of the space between the 2 steps there? Is that grass that is mowed, or is that?
It might be better as a flower bed sort of
I
thing,
was gonna
with
say.
some shrubs that doesn't need a lawnmower. I mean, that's up to them to some degree if they'd rather mow grass. I bet they would rather have flowers there. but it's their land.
Yeah. All right, your recommendation is to go with option 1. Is that correct? And leave the
Well,
roadway.
to begin discussion, I would say, yeah, that's where I landed on it, just because I think it makes the future, that's too much. Just because I think it makes the future flexibility a little bit easier, and it didn't save a ton on costs, even though I'm looking at the wrong number there. So it's not $1,500, it's something more, but it's still pretty nominal.
So with option 1, then we'd look at having the flexibility in the future. We'd be able to stay within the 90-foot right of way. So the only issue would be that the terrace, in order to stay within the 90-foot, the terrace would have to go from 5 to 6 feet.
Like 6 to 5.
I'm sorry, 6 to 5. That's what I meant. Thank you. And with the tree species, we could work with the forester to find something that would work in that. I would be in favor of that because of the flexibility and the idea of staying within the 90-foot right of way. I'm not really in favor of having to get easements. It just is another complication that I think can be avoided, but that's my opinion.
Okay.
I tend to concur with that. Other questions, comments from committee members?
If not, I would make that my motion.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to Dan's motion?
Carl, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Let me just pause here to make sure, Krista, is there anything we're missing that you would weigh in on? You're into this up to your neck.
Maybe like the distance behind the sidewalk to where like the face of the wall would be kind of depends on what type of retaining wall you're using. I think, the retaining wall that they currently have in place, I'm trying to look at the aerial, is maybe like stone stacked or something.
I think it is rock, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're looking to keep it similar, that might take up a little bit more room than you would like a normal like rockwood 8-inch wall.
We tend to put in modular block walls if we can structurally get away with it.
Yeah. I think would probably be putting a railing along that wall. So in consideration with, the sidewalk, maybe we'd do like a curb on that edge of the sidewalk to put the railing on top of. And so that might end up fitting on top of the wall. I guess I can't say for sure a 5-foot terrace is what we would end up with. It might be 4.5. I mean, would that still be acceptable? Or is that getting into more of the questionable that's not something you'd like to see?
It's a good question. And do you
Yeah.
think there's an opportunity to shift the reference line if it does come to that?
Yeah, like if you're thinking we could take a little bit from the terrace on the other side. Yeah. Especially by our what was it, REA? We don't want to compromise the east side too much because that's where the cemetery is. And of course, we're going to run into other issues with that. So, I want to make sure we're not getting beyond the right of way on that side with too much. But yeah, if we can steal a little bit from the terrace on the other side, then yeah, that would probably help, if we shift that right away a little bit or the center line a little bit.
Okay. Is there a practical minimum committee that you are comfortable with for a terrace width?
Well, I mean, I would think the wider the better. The wider we can, as wide as we can possibly make it, we ought to make it. But I don't know that there's an appreciable difference between 5 feet and 4.5 feet in terms of tree species and tree growth and health and what have you. And I think that's about the issue we have to look at there, isn't it?
I think from a practical perspective, yeah, that's going to be the thing people notice.
I have a question. On what kind of fence are you thinking you're gonna put along that wall so that cars don't go flying off the wall down into the lower level?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, yeah.
I would say it would be more of a railing, like a pedestrian railing, not necessarily something to prevent cars from flying off. We're still going to have the curb in the roadway, so any car leaving a roadway, I guess, isn't what we would be looking at in that case. It'd be more just pedestrian, so that there isn't that drop for a fall.
Or a bicycle.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was envisioning too. is more
So I'm not
safety
sure
rail.
that, yeah, right. Like, I don't know if the city has a standard, but you're going to have your 42-inch height or whatever it's going to be and your vertical spacings for your railing, but
Mhm.
Further questions, comments, committee? If not, are we ready to vote on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Krista. Have a good night.
Thanks,
yeah,
Krista.
thank you. You guys too.
Thank you.
So we've got our operating budget up. I wonder, I see that Dave Sarbacher is here. If we want to just skip to the utility operating and capital budgets.
Sure, that's fine with me anyway. There's Gayatri. Good evening, Gayatri.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey,
Sorry, I'm late.
oh, that happens. I get it. Thanks for being able to join us timely here. Did you vote on that last motion, in fact, Catherine?
Which one?
The last one about the road project that we just finished?
No, I just joined. I didn't.
Just
I
joined,
wasn't
okay.
there. Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. Good to know. Okay, so I'll jump over to the utility operating budget. These are decision items and Dave Sarbacher's with us tonight, that Dave prepared. I just want to make sure I'm on the right page here. Yep. Does that show up on your screens okay?
Yes.
Okay. So he's got sewer expenses and water expenses on the same page, and there's not a whole heck of a lot for operating budget decision items being proposed here. It's FMSD fees, because those change every year anyway. A study in here for a lift station alarm system. Oh, and then this is our payment in lieu of taxes, right, Dave?
No, this is just the payment for office supplies and shared different, like the engineering department to help on utility issues and admin
okay.
time and HR and everybody's, we pay a portion of that back to the city for what they do for the utility.
Okay.
Payroll and that kind of stuff. Just like I say, office supplies, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So obviously the big one here is MMSD.
And that's a mandated one that we don't have any control.
Yeah, we're a customer of theirs and they set their billing and then send us a bill.
Yeah.
That's a guesstimate of 10% increase, which sometimes it's about that, sometimes a little less, but that's what we typically do every year with a guest.
All right. Questions about that, committee?
Yeah, so the recommendation is for approval of this to be incorporated into the overall operating budget submittal, which is due August 19th.
Ramsey will make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second to Dan's motion?
This is Carrie. I'll second it.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Second. Huh?
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion on this? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Now this, we just refer to the council for the general budget.
Yeah, well, we'll get it into the finance department and then internally they'll meet with department heads and eventually it'll get to the finance committee for discussion before getting to the council.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
And then the next one, we have a little more sort of full-throated detail here about the capital side of requests that Dave had prepared. So we'll start with water, and then he's got sewer as well. The high-level view, he's got all the breakdowns too of these things, but in 2023, 4, 5, and so on, showing proposed capital projects. Water. And I'll skip past the detail for right now. We can always go back if you want to. And then for sewer, he's got a really similar view of that. There's not a whole lot of it. It's just we replace things with road projects and then as a whole special separate thing, replace equipment. This must be one of the smaller pieces of equipment at that price.
Sean, I'm a little confused about the budgetary process for the vehicle replacement. I thought all of the city vehicles were now in some kind of pooled replacement program.
Well, but not water and sewer, because those are paid out of an enterprise fund, not the city's general capital borrowing.
So these are treated just strictly out of the revenue that the utilities generate,
Correct, yeah.
as opposed to general tax revenue. All right,
But it's,
Right.
it's underneath the mechanics vehicle replacement program, so they do the assessment of the time period between replacements and those kinds of things, so that's their end of it as well for the utility, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. So they're assessing the whole fleet, but the funding is broken out.
Yeah, utility being one of those.
all right. Do we want to look at the detail of either the water main projects or the sewer main projects or any of that, committee?
I can go back to water. There's a few more lines there. Oops.
The only question I'd have, Sean, is the on the water main replacement, 2023, we're looking at 875, and then 2024, we go to 1.2 million. Is that because of Parmenter?
Let me think about that. Let's go to the detail.
That's a pretty good increase, and then we drop down.
Yeah, so it's Boulder, Mayflower, Columbus, and Mound in 2020. Oh, sorry, you said 2024.
Yeah, 2024 and 2025 were higher, considerably
Franklin,
higher.
Dewey Lake, Elmwood. Yeah, so none of that's
Okay,
Parmenter
so-
stuff. And downtown Parmenter is happening next year in 2023.
Yeah, that's up above.
So that's here.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
These are just long lengths, it looks like.
And that's the
Okay.
current 5-year street replacement program. Those line up with those streets for the 5-year plan.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right. Further questions, committee comments?
Are we guessing inflation on these pipe replacements? Because I think what I'm seeing is that pipe costs are going pretty big.
Yes, we have. We learned that this year with our Middleton Beach Road project. But this is a estimate from our engineering firm Strand with just the general costs that they're seeing. And these are higher estimates than what I had in my budget for last year. So yes, we are increasing that by 15%, 20%. So
Okay,
yeah, maybe not the price, it's gonna be the availability. It sounds like maybe a really tough thing again next year.
Yeah, that's been the real killer, is just the lead times, if you can get it.
if you can get it, right. Yeah, that's that old Middleton Road stuff that Madison's been dealing with. I understand that they're on their third set of pipes, or
Oh,
they specified something and they couldn't get it, so they substituted something that didn't work. And they tore that out. Yeah, it's a disaster.
yeah, it's awful.
All right, are we ready for a motion to recommend this portion of the budget to the finance department and the council?
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Carrie. Is there a second to Carrie's motion?
I will second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, further discussion with respect to the motion?
Is that both water and sewer you're moving?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing
Now,
none.
Sean, did you want them separately?
No, it doesn't matter to me at all.
Hearing no further discussion, those in favor of recommending this motion, both for sewer and water, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be what we send to the finance department for recommendation at some point to the council.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Yep, thank you. Have a good
David.
evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
So, oops. So we can go back then, if you want, to the general fund operating budget. And again, I put in just an overview of decision items with a brief explanation instead of all the myriad line items, because if they don't change here, they'll just remain as funded in 2022. We can look at the full thing if you want, but it's a lot. So I was proposing here just things that we're thinking about changing or that we've run into. And do you want me to go through all of them line by line and have little discussions, or do people have notes of things they want to talk about?
Well, what say you, committee? Anybody got anything in particular they want to discuss?
I was curious, Sean, about in the equipment repair and maintenance, and then later in the capital, you asked for some overhead doors, possibility overhead doors. How much are we spending a year to keep these overhead doors working?
I bet Brad could tell you right offhand. It seems to me it's been a little bit worse every year, where the springs go, and sometimes then the track gets bent or the rollers come off, and depending on the day, that can be really frustrating. But it seems to me it's in the $20,000 or $30,000 range
Just to keep the overhead doors working.
to fix them up, put them back together. Yeah.
Wow.
I could be wrong about that, but I think that's what a big part of what we're facing this year is they just
Okay.
seem to keep breaking.
And how many doors are there?
We have of our really big doors, 3 of them.
And later in the capital, I think it was 120. Is that asking for the 3 largest ones?
Let me buzz down to that. Which one was that? I don't remember if it said. And
I don't
Brad?
remember. Here it is.
120.
Yeah, I remember the amount. Oh, and
Oh,
it's
here
for
it
the
is.
3. It is for
3
the 3.
doors.
Okay.
Yeah.
What generally is the, the life that you would expect out of one of these? Are we well beyond the life of?
They were only put in 2015, so they're all of, 7 years old. That doesn't strike me as at all old for a garage door. They're just so heavy
Yeah, right.
that they're just difficult to move up and down.
So we think that with a lighter door that will increase the wear and tear.
That then the springs ought to be able to handle something. Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot of money every year just to keep garage doors working.
Yeah, and I'd rather confirm that with Brad and then get back to you. He's out on leave for a couple of days.
Sure, that's not a problem. As long as we could, by the time this gets to finance, if we could have that information.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Sean, I had a question about, or sorry, did you want to keep talking about that?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. About the leaf collection, to collect lake weeds from Middleton Beach Road.
Okay.
Would the homeowner association pay for that service?
That's how we talked about it a couple of years ago, and they decided not to do that at the time. And so we took it out of the budget. I think maybe even before it got to the finance committee. The alder there was asking, that we keep that conversation alive. But I think she was going to check in with the homeowner association and see once if they're interested now. I think that the real issue that they're banging their heads against is when the county comes by and does their lake weed harvesting, they're maybe not getting close enough to the shoreline or something like that. But picking up weeds from someone's dock is a whole separate program. That's got nothing to do with lake harvesting. And so traditionally what we had asked people to do was, we'll just take your weeds across the street and set them out like anybody puts garden waste out, and we'll just pick them up with our vacuum. Or if it's just terribly out of season, we can swing by with a trailer and just, fork them onto a trail or two. But if they really wanted the convenience of getting them picked up dockside, yeah, it has a cost too.
So they would offset that cost then?
That's the goal, right? So there's this expense that's proposed, but up on top, there was a brand new revenue line item also of $3,000.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, did we used to do that? I heard from a resident here last week that lives down in Tomahawk, and he said that he had put his weeds on the dock, and that Dane County had been picking them up, and they stopped, and he asked, and that he was informed that Middleton quit paying for it. So was this something that we had paid for previously?
Not while I've been director, certainly, but I don't think even when Toby was director that I heard about that. So I'd be surprised.
So it sounds as though maybe the county was.
They might have made a mistake.
Well, I was going to say doing it out of the generous.
Yeah.
Because
I know
West Spirit, but probably not.
I know Westport does, but that's nowhere near getting to us. Well, actually, parts of it is getting near us on the north side, but maybe
because there's not just
Tomahawk.
Yeah, there's not just Middleton Beach Road. Then, if we were to offer that, I suppose we'd have to look at and finding out how these folks would pay for it too. But there's Tomahawk, and then you go up Baskerville. The bay there.
Yeah, Mendota probably has a couple.
Yeah. So there's quite a bit of shoreline there.
Right. Yeah. So if people want it, I guess we'd want to hear, because the county can program that, but they only come by. I can't remember if it's twice a month, maybe. And it's a pretty short season with pretty limited opportunity.
Okay.
And they're not going to want weeds sitting on their pier for any length of time, but.
So if I understand correctly, then what you tell the folks is take those weeds and put them in, weeds and put them in the terrace, and we'll pick them up with.
With our leaf collection, yeah,
Okay, all right,
when we're doing that, or,
sure.
you know, if the city wants, we can make a special run if there's a
Put 'em in your garden, you grow
unusual
tomatoes
weedy
that look like
time.
cantaloupe. Times have changed. Decades and decades and decades ago, I used to pick up weeds for the city of Madison for the Rivers and Lakes Division. And we did it on barges, and they didn't have to, citizens didn't even have to put them on the dock. We took the weeds right out of the water and off the beaches, put them on the barges and took them away.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine having enough staff for that.
That was a good summer job that employed quite a few students, and I ultimately graduated into running the weed harvester for the city of Madison when the city of Madison did it. Fun job.
Sounds like it.
Now you're starting to age us.
Yes.
Every day you get to work on your tan.
Yeah.
I have a question on the landfill. There wasn't a dollar amount. Is that just being worked on yet?
It is. I have a couple of questions out. One of the big ones is we do a biannual contract with our consultant. And so this is one of those years where their pricing is subject to change. And then the other one is how much reimbursement we'll get from DNR for our long-term care maintenance fund. I expect that this will end up being a negative number, if not zero, but I don't think next year's budget at the landfill has to go up. So I tried pulling a number together and just couldn't do it and just left it blank for now. But it won't be a plus, I think.
Sean, what is the total increase in the budget in these decision items for next year as compared to this year?
All totaled, it's $188,000 if everything got approved.
And what do you reasonably expect the council will allocate for an amount of money for this?
Well, I don't know. We still have to have our discussion at more of a staff level with our finance director.
Yeah.
Where we sit down and hash through the nuts and bolts of some of this and try to figure out, well, what can we do if this isn't possible? Because this is a pretty big number.
What is that an approximate percentage increase?
Good question. It's probably 7 or 8%.
It's probably not unreasonable.
No.
No, but being able to pay for it's a different question. I don't think it's unreasonable. I just don't know that we can afford it. And some of it's just not discretionary. I mean, the price of gas is the price of gas, and our choices are, do you drive it or do you park it? And, that's all there is. Some of it's a little bit more discretionary. I mean, we could shut down Tiedemann Pond pump. We'd have a higher water level, but we wouldn't have to pump it as much. And there was an item in here that's been kicked around a bit for bringing snow and ice removal for the downtown properties into the city's budget. It's right now in the CDA budget. That hasn't been approved yet, but I keep asking. And so, you know, there's some of those that aren't small items that are a little bit more discretionary.
Sean, not to nitpick small items, but I just had a question real quick about the replacement poles, and it's only a $7,000 amount, but you say that there's specialty light poles approved in some subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, do we not have, when somebody wants to have something, you know, more expensive or out of the ordinary in a Bishop's Bay, for example, would it not make more sense to have as part of the developer agreement that they pay the difference between whatever the standard is that we use through the rest of the city and what they want in their subdivision?
We could look at that. I mean, it does feel to me like we've got a standard and we have so many neighborhoods that decided to go away from that. And they have various price points, but yeah, some of these are very pricey. And I mean, this $7,000 figure is us. That was our downtown TIF project to rebuild
Sure.
Harris Avenue. You know, and what we've got right now in our city developer agreement is whatever they choose that the city approves, they give us 2 extras. But as soon as those 2 extras are gone, it's just on us.
But we have a similar thing, as I seem to recall, with respect to the mailbox replacement policy. We have a standard amount that we'll reimburse people for mailboxes that are damaged by city plows or whatever. And we've had several cases of neighborhood associations that have higher quality, if you will, mailboxes, at least more expensive mailboxes. And we pay up to a certain amount, and then the HOA or the homeowner takes over from there.
And yeah, so this is kind of like that, but it's even more similar to, you know, what Dan was talking about would be more similar to up in Bishop's Bay, where they have special street signs.
Yeah.
They got fancier poles with backplates and everything. And there we do have a special agreement that's written against every parcel number in that development that says if they want a special stop sign, they got to pay extra for it. Otherwise, we'll put up a normal stop sign. And this would be that kind of deal. Now they're cumbersome to administer because every time a plat comes in, you have to write all those PIN numbers into the agreement, but it could be done to let the homeowners association know they got to pony up for it.
Yeah, and I frankly think that that's only fair in light of what, you know, the rest of the city gets. There should be a standard, and if you choose to go way above that standard, then you should be responsible.
Yeah, and I think we'd have to launch an agreement like that with homeowners associations that already exist with either very hard to find or very expensive poles to say, you know, we found this other thing that we're going to have to start putting up unless you want to reach an agreement or whatever. Because even Middleton Hills is very difficult to replace a light pole.
I think it's something we're going to have to look at.
Sean, the number that's in this item, the $7,000,
Yeah.
that's intended to replace how many standard poles? I thought somewhere else there was language or statistics that said the standard poles cost about $2,000 plus what it costs MG&E to energize it. Like,
Yeah, and depending what it is, our direct bury concrete poles that you see
Yeah.
for some street lighting, those are closer to $1,000, but some of our standard aluminum poles are $2,000.
but I thought that the area along University Avenue anyway, there were 42 poles or something.
Yeah, yeah, and those are galvanized steel poles.
You're not going to replace too many of them for $7,000.
No, that would be its own capital project to get those replaced. Or, you know, if that doesn't get approved in the capital project.
Excuse me, Sean.
Yeah. Hello?
My internet connection is really unstable. I'm going to bail out.
Oh, okay, good to know.
All
You want
right.
to try rejoining? Maybe try rejoining, Carl, but thanks for the heads up. So I was just saying, if that capital project doesn't get funded to replace those, we'll just replace them as they're falling over.
You got 'em down.
Yeah, one at a time.
Okay. All right, any further questions, committee, or comments on these decision items?
Do you want me to scroll through them just slowly?
Well,
See if anything jumps out, or are we ready to go?
I guess I had one last question real quick on the signs and the markings. The road paint cost, there's a $10,000 item. Is that in part in the narrative, you talk about road paint costs have increased and requests are trending. Are you talking about, for instance, the requests for the green paint for in between crosswalks? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or what?
Not even that, it's just more bike lanes, more edge lines, more symbols.
Oh, okay.
That has grown sort of dramatically. In fact, we're bumping up into just even staff availability to do it. So at some point, we're just going to have to hire somebody to do it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right. Further questions or comments, or are we ready for a motion on the decision items?
Or if there are any suggested changes or strikeouts, that would be good to know too.
This will go to the finance department, where I assume you'll sit down with Bill and strike what you don't think is going to make the final cut. Then it'll go to finance and council, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm fine with this. I'll make the motion to recommend this then. In light of it, it'll go to the finance department first.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to Dan's motion?
John, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on these items? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's what we'll send along to the finance department.
All right.
Okay,
Then we've got our capital budget stuff come up, and I'm trying it in a different format this year. If you hate it, let me know. But this is just a simple Word document with a prioritized listing, staff prioritized listing. Because the spreadsheets we use are really hard to reorder once they're put in. They just are cumbersome to shift the priorities of. And that's a big part of what we want to do at this level.
actually, I liked the format quite a bit. I thought it made it much easier to navigate than the
Yeah.
spreadsheets were.
Yeah, I
So,
prefer this too.
issue
Yeah.
by issue and between the construction costs, engineering costs, testing costs, I thought that was very helpful.
Okay.
I agree. Very good.
Well, then we'll try it again next
Yeah.
year. So I don't know if there are project-specific questions, but why don't we start with streets? That's one of our really big ones where we tend to have a $2 million capital borrowing target for the city. I separately summarized what's coming out of TIF and the lion's share of that being Pleasant View Road and then Parmenter north of Century Avenue up by Greenbrier, where Bell Farm development is taking place. So a lot of it is there, and then the downtown reconstruction is mostly also TIF. So I didn't count that against our $2 million cap, otherwise it starts to look pretty scary.
So then that brings us to item number 4 then, right?
For all practical purposes, yeah, if we want to sort of gloss over TIF, then we start in with, this is the complement of the downtown Parmenter Street project, but these parts aren't funded or fundable by TIF. So it's an extra block of Elmwood to be done with that west of Parmenter Street. And then also a block of Parmenter Street itself going up the hill towards South Avenue.
So that would be done in conjunction then.
Same time, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
just
that makes
different fund.
a whole lot of sense.
So that's why we made this one a high priority.
Yeah, from a cost standpoint.
Sean, I have one question that I raised earlier when we were looking at design elements for Parmenter Street downtown. And that's to have one of the big overhead stop signs also placed at Hubbard, like it is at Elmwood. You know what I'm
Okay.
talking
I
Because-
do, yeah, that's not in the project right now. Is that something the committee, well, might be hard to
Thought
get
that would-
direction from a committee during a meeting on that. But we should talk about that.
Could get TIF funding for that. I think that's an important thing. When you come down that hill on Parmenter Street and cross the railroad tracks, you all of a sudden get to a whole lot of distractions between pedestrians crossing the street and storefronts and directional signs for city buildings and what have you, and that Hubbard Avenue stop sign sometimes kind of gets lost because you focus on the one ahead of you at Elmwood. And it just seems to me, for consistency's sake and safety's sake, and particularly if we could get it done under the TIF District 3, another big overhead stop sign for Hubbard would be a good addition to that hunk of roadway.
Let me just, add a note about that, but I don't want any committee action. It's really not on the agenda, but just.
No,
as a
I know.
thought,
I
I'll
just-
write it down. Yeah. Okay. And the good news is stop compliance there, at least when I've been around, has been good. You know, I walk across there and bike across there quite a lot. But I hear you. Okay. So that's what that project's all about anyway, is sort of a complement to the TIF one. Street surface treatments, we always rate very highly because it's just a really good bang for the buck.
And we're between 200 and 250 every year for that. We pretty much allocate.
Yep, exactly.
Sean,
It's
I-
sort of our target.
I have a question about that too. When the bids came in for this year's projects, we ended up with about $75,000 under what we anticipated, or something to that effect. Have
Yeah.
we decided where we're going to spend that money in terms of additional projects that might get done for this year, or?
Well, we're looking first to make sure that overall the capital road program ends up in the black before we get too carried away. But we did get direction to maximize that to the degree we can. So if we can get a little ahead on crack filling, then we can still do that.
Okay,
Yeah, we reallocated whatever was left over. If my recollection is right, we reallocated that to move ahead with whatever you could move ahead with
Yeah.
to get the biggest bang for our buck. In other words, use the savings to do more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Some days we have the reverse problem, but
Yeah, right.
we got lucky here. But yes, exactly. We haven't really done a lot of parking lot maintenance, but we put it in the road program this year to resurface the library parking lot next year.
So Sean, I have a question about that in regards to, the direction and the study on the civic campus and not knowing where exactly that's going to end, and how long, so we're looking at a $200,000 budget item.
Yeah.
And how long a period of time does the resurfacing last?
This
So are we
is,
looking at 20 years?
yeah, probably, right? This is
Okay.
full depth. So this is not a
Okay.
little thing. It's just so beat up with alligator cracking and potholing that we
Sure.
can't even do a partial depth milling there.
But so my question with this item is, from a timing standpoint, as to where we are with the civic campus, what plan is going to be picked? Is that going to change? Are we going to spend $200,000 on a project that we're going to get 5 years worth of life out of? So
That's the risk, yeah.
yeah, I'm a little hesitant with spending that kind of money when we don't know what direction we're going.
And if we thought it was 5 years, I'd probably encourage more pothole patching. If it's going to be 10 years, I'd probably encourage replacing it.
So would it make sense, because we're not really sure where we're going in this, to push this? Is it at all possible to push this out a year to give the planning stage more so we know where we're at?
I would say yes. It's going to be more babysitting, pothole patching, but a year, ideal.
Okay.
I agree with that. I had the same exact question. I was thinking we should hold off on that until we have the plan. So I agree with those comments.
And I'll try to see with Sean Alsrud prepares most of this. I'll try to see if he has a separate extra project he could slide in here in 23 in its place. Although, frankly, the way bids have been coming, that might already be spoken for. But I'll say, let's bump that back to 24. Okay. Middleton Springs Drive, we did push back. We needed the money for Middleton Beach Road instead. So that's getting reintroduced. Clark and Lee has been on our design board for a couple of years, but we pushed it back to wait for the high school stuff to be done and then Conservancy Bend to be done. So now both of those are pretty well wrapped up. Conservancy Bend, I think, has a couple more phases, but who knows when those are going to happen. So it doesn't seem to pay to wait much longer on that. And then Elmwood Avenue resurfacing is literally just a new asphalt project. So we'll design that in-house and get new pavement. That's a pretty long stretch there from Bristol to Gateway. Lake Dewey would be just reconstruction design. Now there's a planning level initiative in that area going on right now. So we wanted to hold off on the road design to make sure that it aligns with the master plan. We do have funding for it. We just haven't started that yet. And then the rest of this, for the most part, also is just design.
And the total of all those projects, excluding the TIF projects, was what?
Just over $2 million. Yeah, whoops, I'm on the wrong page back quite a lot here. So as close as we could get, but going over.
Well, if you take the 200,000 out for the parking lot, is there another project that you could apply that to?
Is there any project that we delayed? It seems to me that there was a couple of small projects that we delayed that we might be able to move back up.
I'm going to talk to Sean about that, yeah, and see what he would recommend. He's got a whole program laid out with points and evaluations and everything else, and I hate to sort of just jump in and yank the rug on him, but we'll start with that.
Well, I'd hate not to spend the $200,000 because we have plenty of places that need the expenditure.
Well, and these are just budget level estimates, not necessarily based on design, and I don't know yet what next year's bid prices are going to look like. So
Well, I understand all that.
I don't have a lot of comfort in our numbers anyway.
Well,
But Bob is correct. We should look at, and if I'm not mistaken, there was one or two projects that fell off the 5-year and got moved out a year that would fit within this budget, I believe. So if we go back and look at the 5-year plan, there was a road off of Century Avenue that came in at 90,000, I think. So there is, I think that there is opportunity to be able to fill that hole.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember we delayed Columbus Drive and another road over in Saks Woods because we were going to combine them, but that would probably be more than
That's quite a bit more.
yeah.
those are projects.
Yeah.
There's all those little courts off Columbus Drive, Nina Pinton, Santa Maria.
Mhm.
But it would make sense to do those with Columbus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that wouldn't work because I think we were trying to group them all together.
Mhm. Okay.
I think if we looked at the reconfigured 5-year plan, you'll see where we switched a couple of things, moved a couple of things back.
Yeah, well, we'll start there. Yeah, if we can identify something that got bumped or pushed back because of these other things, that's the best place to go.
Yes.
All right, any other comments, questions with respect to the road project list for next year? Are we ready for a motion?
So I would make that motion that we recommend this with the deletion of resurfaced library parking lot and looking at reallocating those funds in the amount of 200,000.
Is there a second to Dan's motion?
This is Carrie, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation. This goes to the Finance Committee now, correct? Or Finance Department again.
Well, it'll go through the finance department, but they oftentimes just send these straight to the finance.
So it'll be our recommendation for road projects for 2023, or wherever the heck it goes.
There we go. Exactly. I'll make it be so. Okay. And then next up, we have a category called Other. I didn't come up with that title. And that's basically most of what we do that isn't a street or a vehicle. And so it's quite a hodgepodge. And this ranking was a little difficult for us to reach any sort of consensus. So don't feel bad if you feel like wildly changing these priorities. And again, if there's anything you just don't see the value of, to strike it is fine with me.
I think they're probably all very worthwhile projects, but as I did some quick math in my head with this stuff, it came into over $1 million. And I don't think you're going to get anything approaching $1 million for other. In the
No.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our target typically is closer to $100,000.
Well,
So prioritizing really matters here.
what in this, are these, the way you have them listed here, is this a rough prioritization in your mind of how you'd like to see these come down? What are the greatest needs here?
Well, that's always hard to say too. What breaks first becomes my highest need, but we just started this year a program to start retiring some of our old traffic signal controllers, ideally before they fail. This one would be mostly paid back by the county, actually, being at Century and Allen, they pay for their approach shares. So I can't remember if they're paying 2/3 or 3/4 of this one. But to try to stay on a scheduled program for something like that is
So are you
advisable.
saying that 65,000 is the full cost and they reimburse some share of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that's not, at the end of the day, that's not all city out of pocket.
Sure.
That's mostly county. This one seemed like a safety problem. I wasn't aware people were slipping out at the recycle center when that floor is wet, but apparently they are. So Brad talked to some vendors. I think he also talked to somebody about diamond grinding it instead of just coating it, because that will tend to wear off over time and have to be reapplied. But I didn't get a price from him on diamond grinding. But that seemed like a safety thing that it's harder harder to ignore.
I'd be curious as to how long the epoxy floor coating would last with all the cars driving in and out in the weather. And,
Yeah,
you know, my experience with those is that they look nice for a short period of time, but it's not really any kind of long-term fix.
that's kind of what I'm worried about too. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Brad. Either he's been gone or I've been gone. So he gave me a number and then it was his turn to be gone. And so we'll definitely talk before we turn this in.
Okay.
But I have some concern about that too, because if it has to be done every 3rd year, that's pricey.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's another, I'm just thinking in warehouses, sometimes there's like lanes where you're supposed to walk and it seems like there's some kind of like strips of some kind of tacky tape or some kind of, I don't know what it is, but has traction. I just wonder if there's some other options like that.
I have seen that. I think it's better if you keep it dry so it doesn't curl and become its own tripping hazard.
Yeah.
Part of our problem is we don't have sort of a process layout at the recycle center. People just sort of stop where they stop and then they get out and run around for dumpsters, which is fine, but it doesn't lend itself to walking paths.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we might be able to keep cars off the walking paths, but it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Mobile radios has been advised for several years. We actually did replace the DPW repeater, which the police sometimes use. That's in the basement of the library. This would start in on replacing the actual vehicle radios. And then the next one was to replace some of the downtown. There's a bunch of steel streetlight poles. That I think we could use TIF money for. So we want to follow up on that anyway. There's a
So if-
request. Oh, go ahead.
If we took the traffic signal controllers at 65,000 and the county pays 2/3, and we hold off on the epoxy for now until we get more answers. We take the radio replacements at 24, the aluminum poles are TIF. We take the RRFB beacon at 15. That brings us up to 59,000.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking it'd be in the 65 or 70 range, but I'll take your numbers for it to try to get that far. I haven't looked at or had a chance to talk with Brad about these next couple of things. So I just put them in here for now, but I don't know much about them yet in terms of what the parts room is lacking for storage, or whether there's an actual demonstrated need for awnings over the entry doors at the garage bays. I mean, I'm sure their floor gets a little bit wet too, but it can't be anything like the recycle center. And then the vehicle wash bay walls, I haven't seen them either. So I wanted to talk with him about this. He put these proposals in and gave me some.
I wouldn't
views.
think that any of the three of those are terribly critical, except perhaps the awnings. I mean, if there's rainwater coming in, that's something you want to prevent, I guess, but.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that we get a ton of foot traffic in and out of our garage bay. It's either people driving cars in or whatever, but I'm sure there's some walking in and out. The Pheasant Branch Road sidewalk would just be a connection from basically Middleton Glen up along the east side of Pheasant Branch Road to where that path from Middleton Hills cuts down toward into the Conservancy Trail through Conservancy condos there that the committee had put on the board a while ago. So that's in as a budget request. Pedestrian crossings at Century Avenue. Oh, this was actually one that our traffic consultant in doing the Lake Street apartment TIA recommended we look into is somehow reconfiguring the geometrics of crosswalks at that intersection of Century and Allen to make it a little easier to cross there. And that is not my most fun crossing, but we have bus stops on both sides of the road. So I think that'd be worth looking into.
Okay.
We touched base a little bit on replacement of doors, the 3 overhead doors at the operations center.
Sean,
That
what's
one,
in both
that
places?
one I would think would be worth, I mean, that exceeds probably that item in and of itself, probably exceeds what we're gonna get. But that one seems to be fairly important. If you can save $30,000 a year in maintenance costs on the existing doors, there's some fairly immediate payback on this one.
And,
Yeah,
and
there's
I
a
want
4-year
to
payback on that. That's pretty good.
I want to confirm that number first before we get too carried away. That's what I recall from an old conversation with Brad, but
Okay.
I'd rather get that updated in my own head.
And so
I
why-
thought it was in the 20 or 30 range. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Oh, no, it's okay. Why is that in both places? So why is it here and in the other?
Well, so we have operational costs, which are
Oh,
fixing what breaks. This would be replacing what breaks.
got it. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Ceiling fans has not been on my radar as a big issue, so I want to talk to Brad about that, as well as the metal lathe, but I already said the metal lathe is well below 10 grand. It probably isn't even viable as a capital project.
Yeah, it's too small for a capital project.
Some year we can either afford it or not. And, you know, we'll just have to put it on that particular instead. I think it'd be a good thing to have, but maybe not a capital expense. And the awnings are probably in that same ballpark. I know his estimate was 9 grand. But if we did one and then did another one, you know, if and when the operating budget allows, we might get by with that. Start with the most important door and work our way down. University streetlight poles, it's a pretty big ticket thing. And again, we can break this into pieces or do them one at a time. But I had asked Tom Weber, who does a lot of our streetlight work, for an estimate anyway. At least he came up with something. Bridge repairs we had looked into trying to do, but we didn't have anywhere near enough budget to do it. So we pulled back and submitted this whole separate request to do a lot of bridge deck work to try to seal cracks and cover some spalling. Basically to seal coat a concrete bridge decks so that we're not getting salt water into our rebar.
So this would kind of qualify as, I imagine that these bridges are inspected by the state,
By the county. Yep.
by the county. So spending the money to keep the salt from getting to the rebar is gonna extend the life of these bridges, and they're fairly expensive to replace.
Oh yeah, you don't want to be here when we're replacing those. That gets crazy. It
Right.
just occurred to me that might be a good backfill project for the streets program. Bridges
Yeah.
are sort of streets.
Okay.
I'll maybe take a look at that too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Traffic signal over at Hedden Road has been on my list for years and years, but it's a really difficult thing without really upsetting either County M or County Q, how to get a little more time for Hedden Road. So I get that it's frustrating. So far, the best advice we can give is if you're on Hedden and want to turn left, go straight and get to South Ridge Way and then get to Valley Ridge Road and then turn right onto Century Avenue. It is admittedly a mess.
Turn right to go left.
Yeah, you literally would be going around the block. But if I wanted to go from northbound to westbound, I think I'd go around the block. It's got to be faster.
It is.
So we had looked into that years ago with one of our traffic impact analyses, and really there were a lot of highway changes going to be needed, and then we thought the county was going to take on part of M with their expansion program, but more recently they came back and said no, they're not going to get as far as this intersection for quite a long time. So if we want to do any road work ourselves to increase queue lengths on Highway Q, they basically said go for it. So I don't even know if we could do this in a vacuum without also changing some storage, lane storage on the roads, because I think the other 3 legs would have longer queues to shorten the one at Hedden. Anyway, I left that as a low priority because it's hard to say what the best answer there is. And then there was a request to reconstruct the retaining wall from the fire department, fire district, I guess it would be, which bought that property at the northwest corner of Century and Q. It looked stable to me, so I just left it on, but as a very low priority. There was a request for an additional pedestrian cross connection at Tiedemann Pond across Gammon Road someplace. There is no connection to the northeast corner of that pond, and it's difficult to make one. It's just really steep. So nothing we do would be handicap accessible. The shortest route and lowest cost would be crossing at Woodgate and then just going down the hill to connect to the boardwalk. I know people are sort of just voluntarily walking across Gammon and then going down the stairway that's at the pump station. I'm fine with that. But I would not want to encourage that. It's a terrible place to cross the street.
Especially with the grade school right there. I don't think you want to put another crosswalk at Woodgate Road. I mean, I think their sight lines from either direction are pretty bad right there. Traffic is heavy often and it speeds often. That's the city's favorite speed trap. I see red and blue lights flashing over there quite frequently, and I just think that's a very dangerous situation to put a crosswalk in.
Yeah, it's not something I'm excited about. I think with our RFBs, and we've got sort of that big neutral space painted out in the middle of the road south of Woodgate, we could build a safety island out in the middle of the road. It might make it fine, but
The other thing,
I guess what I'm wondering is,
that path is, other than if you're out for a walk, you would go down that hill to walk around the pond, but that otherwise doesn't go anywhere. I mean, there's a crosswalk and an RFB at South Avenue, and there's one at Fortune or Sweeney Fortune, I guess that is. I mean, and if you're just out for a walk, you can go to either one of those, get across the road, and in short order get onto the path around Tiedeman's Pond. I don't know why you need one right in the middle anyway.
that's the bigger part that I just wasn't sure is what's the need for that. We've got other connectivity to that path that goes around the pond, and like you say, if you're out for a walk anyway, granted it may not be the nicest walk to go along a street, but we do have ways to get there.
Yeah.
So it's on here, and if somebody wants it to be a higher priority, up to and including the Common Council, they have this option.
I personally would not make it a high priority, but
There was talk of trying to prevent U-turns at Frank Lloyd Wright Glacier Ridge Road. We've looked into that a couple of times as a committee. At first, we eliminated parking on the street in the intersection, which is against statute anyway, but then restored it because the business community really wanted parking next to the shops, the retail stores on the south side of that intersection. And we posted a couple of no U-turn signs, and yet we have reports people continue to make U-turns there. Not really sure why, but I'll take
2
that.
crashes in 10 years doesn't seem to make that to be a very imperative thing to do either, in my mind.
Yeah, and neither one of them had anything to do with a U-turn. They both were people pulling away from the curb in the intersection because they were parked at one of the retail spots and got sideswiped by someone that was also going eastbound. So they weren't turning, they were just pulling away without
For the record,
seeing.
they come in and want to park on Frank Lloyd right in front of the grocery store, and they're go in, make the U-turn and come back. My horn does a pretty good job policing that whenever I drive through, but which I do quite a bit. But other than that, I don't see any crashes either. Even the ones that I blasted my horn at have literally stopped in the middle because they saw me coming. So,
Yeah, so we don't have any crash problem attributable to the U-turns. It's clearly a frustration. And I don't know that we can do much beyond
Who's
rebuilding that
frustrated with
intersection.
John,
Uh,
who's called?
There's a
Susan?
few citizens, no, there's just a few citizens that just keep this alive as others.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that, Sean. Can we remove some of these so we don't have to kind of,
Yes,
talk about them next year if we think that they're just not worth considering, or what is the process, I guess? Or do you like to
Oh,
kind of there to? just
yeah, no, they don't have to stay around forever. If the committee sees no value to these things, just tell me, delete number 19, don't bring it back. Then it just goes away.
Okay.
And then the Lake Allen feasibility study was another recommendation from the Lake Apartments TIA that said really ought to take a closer look at this at some point. But we've got time on that.
All right, is that the end of the list?
Yeah, that's all. Gee, just those 20.
Well, I don't know how people want to proceed with this, but I mean, obviously, there's no sense in putting all 20 of these into a recommendation to do anything with. I think there are quite a few that we could eliminate. And I don't know how committee would like to proceed with it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't propose to put all of these in 2023. I mean, obviously, some of the lower rated ones I would push into future years from a budget perspective.
Well, maybe we can go back up the list from here and just decide the ones that we don't wish to put in. And I would say, let's stop a minute, Sean. I'd say this is my opinion anyway, we could get rid of number 20, number 19, and number 18, number 17.
So 17 through 20, 17, 18, 19, 20.
I think number 20, though, at some point, we're gonna have to bring back around.
Well,
Because that one's not gonna get any better. That situation is just gonna get worse. So
Yeah.
we can take it off for this year, but I think it's gonna have to come back around.
Or should I just push it into the farthest program year, like 2028? So it doesn't get lost or thrown away. It just gets de-emphasized.
I would advocate for that.
that's fine.
Okay. So I'll just move that to the last year.
Are you moving all of those to the last year, Sean?
Oh, well, I was going to move just 20.
Okay.
Do you want to see 17, 18, or 19?
No, not really. Not me, anyway.
No.
18 will come back. I know that will come back, sure, but.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe push 18 to further away, just so we don't lose like options. It seemed like somebody did some thinking there. And I agree, Bob, I think it will come back, but.
But this is the first year we have seen that one, and some of these other ones we've seen for a longer period of time than that.
You're gonna push it out, Sean, till 28?
If that's what you'd want, so numbers 18 and 20 to do that.
I would agree with that.
But then 17 and 19 to just go away.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Scroll back up a bit further here then.
I don't know, do you want to do something about Hedden Avenue?
Is there a way that we can coordinate Hedden Ave? There doesn't sound as though there's any good options until the county does something. So I don't want it to just totally fall off the radar, but I'd like to see it, coincide with what the county's doing. So when we have an idea of you understand what I'm saying, Sean?
I do, and that's part of why we kept it low on the list and far into the future until the county could tell us when they're going to rebuild M in that area. But
So let's
recently
push
they
it
said
out.
they're not. But I
Let's
should
just
keep
put-
that low. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just push it out a few years
That's easy
and
enough.
see if the county can give us any kind of indication.
This next one, bridge repairs exceeds the amount of money all by itself that we are gonna get. But it seems to me that that's an important one to do at some point, and I would be comfortable putting that in, even if it gets cut out. That's basic infrastructure maintenance, and we shouldn't let go.
So could we take that item and we knocked out the 200,000 for the parking lot?
Mhm.
Can we flip flop?
I think a case could be made that bridges are really parts of roads. And move it to that entire other category instead.
I think that would be something to look at. The dollar amounts would be about the same. It keeps us on top of the maintenance of our bridges, which I think we can probably agree is a good idea.
I would say so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Can make that change.
And for some reason, Sean, if it can't, I would suggest that at least get pushed up in the list, I guess, as a priority. But
Yeah, that might be the list.
yeah, that's true.
Light poles.
Yeah, what to do with some of that? And I think too, this is the kind of thing I can put into next year. And if we have to replace one or two in the meantime, so be it.
Yeah,
I think
let's
that's
do
a good
that.
idea.
Yep.
That sounds good.
The next one, we kind of agreed shouldn't be in the capital budget anyway.
Right. Yep.
And Sean, you needed more information about number 12, so I don't know that I had put that in there.
Yeah, I need to figure that out with Brad.
I think the next one, replace the overhead doors. So I mean, if we're having that big a maintenance expenditure every year, doing something with those overhead doors might be a good idea.
Okay. Okay. And would you encourage moving it up in priority then?
Yes, I think, well, this is just me speaking, but I certainly would put that as a higher priority than the epoxy coating on the vehicle wash bay walls, for example.
Mhm.
I would totally agree with that. And between now and the time that I think what we're really gonna have to do is take a look at what those maintenance costs are to be able to make a really informed decision. But if the numbers that you mentioned earlier are accurate, it almost makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah, I would say it does.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
it should go to like number 6.
Let me zoom up or buzz up there a little bit. After the RRF.
Yeah.
Okay, I could see that. All right. Let me go back down just a bit then. Gets us back to 10 head crossings. Well, this would just be a design to reconfigure them. They'd have to be reconfigured in some future year. Or a sidewalk extension.
So I think maybe at this point we could, drop out the the epoxy floor coating for more information, the shelving to see whether it's needed, the awnings and the epoxy on, and then just move the sidewalk and the design reconfiguration up and just move forward with that.
So kind of just leave 9 and 10 in their order, but they'll just bubble up because 6, 7, and 8 go down.
Right.
And maybe even away if we determine. we don't need it.
Exactly. Along with number 2, because we don't know that epoxy floor coating, I'm just not convinced that 30,000, to spend 30,000 on that is gonna get us any kind of value.
Okay, so I'll request sort of some life cycle information. All right. And again, I'm sure Brad knows all this stuff. Our schedules have just been terrible for the past month. All right. Well, I think that's a good jump, and I know it's really hard to keep tabs on this as we're talking about it, but I'll plan to shuffle this around and send it back out to all of you. We
Okay.
can't talk about it online as a committee, but if individually any one of you gives me some input, I don't mind making a change and resharing that.
So are we kind of doing this by consensus that you're gonna make these changes in the priority listing? Or do you want a motion to kind of wrap this up somehow?
Yeah, typically in the past, we've done a motion that, with this advice, to change priority order and or eliminate things that you're recommending this capital budget.
Okay,
And you have it all written down because none of us remember exactly how the order is anymore. So
Hey,
if somebody makes the motion, you have it.
you're on candid camera. I do have my notes and I do have replay.
And so Sean, you would send this back to us before it gets approved for feedback, or?
Before it goes to the finance department on the 19th.
Okay,
And that's well prior to it going to the finance committee. So
okay, so we'll
even
make a
if I bring it back to the next committee meeting, I mean, if the committee wants to talk about it further with the new shuffle, that's fine. And we can get Brad's input prior to then as well. I'll still have turned it in on the 19th, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about it on the 20th. And if I tell Bill, oh, there's 3 more changes, he's still going to have the framework of what we're up to. So we'll be okay.
Yeah, there's still time after tonight to make some small tweaks.
Yes.
okay.
All right, so did someone, I lost track here, did someone make a motion to have Sean put those changes that we discussed together for our review prior to submitting it to the finance department?
I can
that-
make that motion. So what you said, Bob, I'll try to paraphrase here. So we make the motion to recommend that Sean will make these changes as he's noted in terms of the priority, and then to shift a few of the items to future years, and then also to eliminate some. Do you need more detail than that, Sean? Otherwise, it'll say like C notes, and that you'll make those changes and send it back to us for review prior to sending it to the finance committee.
Well, I'll give it to the finance department prior to bringing it back to you, but then it'll come back to you anyway, just for, final thoughts. So we can update what I will have turned in prior to the next meeting.
Okay.
It's just the way the process works. Bill needs it all in his spreadsheet format before he can do anything.
Okay,
Even though it's not going to go anywhere for a little while.
okay.
All right,
So
you're
you make
comfortable with that motion, Sean?
Yeah,
Yeah, I have enough, other than a second. Oh,
I'll second Don.
okay.
Do we have a second for Carrie's motion?
Yeah.
Don.
Don seconded.
Mhm.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and Sean will look forward to hearing back from you here soon with respect to the reordered items.
All right. And then we don't every year, but this year we have requests for new vehicles. Now, these are not replacement vehicles. That's a whole separate thing. This would be increasing the fleet. That makes sense. Zoom it up a bit.
What's our budget for this, Sean?
There isn't one. There isn't even a reasonable historical target for something like that. Traditionally, we have tried not to increase the size of our fleet, to just focus on replacements. And the F-350 and F-550 in particular have been requested in the past several times. They've not been funded. And so they're sort of just on a tickler list, that it would be good sometimes to be able to take a smaller truck than a big truck. But if a big truck's what we got and it's what we need, then we'll take that one out. The last one is more of a different setup entirely, which is effectively a chassis cab that's made to fit different kinds of boxes. So it's not set up as a permanent plow truck, for instance, but it could be used for leaf collection or snow plowing and salting, or, it's sort of a Swiss Army truck. And the one nice thing about it would be that it could collect leaves with just the driver operator. So instead of someone pushing the hose around as the vacuum, it would just be its own remote controlled snorkel, effectively. The downside, of course, is that it's pricey. The upside is it saves crew.
So it'd be an interesting discussion to see if one could figure out how many manpower hours and the cost of that.
Right, exactly. And sometimes what it comes down to for us really is just a choice of priorities. When we're picking up leaves, frankly, we're not doing anything else. But what else could we be doing that we're not, is one of those factors.
Would it be at all possible to be able to do some back of the napkin kind of figures to be able to tell us in the future how that would work, what those numbers would look like?
Yes, we have crew hours spent picking up leaves. So that wouldn't even be a terribly difficult thing to figure out. If we could reduce crew hours spent on that, they could be increased somewhere else. Now, that's not money out of pocket. That's just opportunity.
Right. Interesting to know, though.
Mhm.
Well, you said we've requested the F-350 and the F-550 before, and to no avail.
Mhm.
Doesn't hurt to put them in again. I mean, doesn't seem to me, somebody's gonna make up their mind what to do with all of these things, but seems to me that there is a valid case made that all three of those vehicles would be useful, and one of them might save some money in terms of labor costs.
Well, or shift labor opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah, right.
I guess we're paying the crew either way.
Yeah.
What they do is up to us.
Well, committee, what would you like to do with the vehicle requests?
I think I'll make a motion to move it forward to the finance group. And cross our fingers.
Just
That's not
as
part of
is,
it.
or is there anything you'd want to strike or move?
Let's put them all in and just see where the chips fall.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to Don's motion?
I will.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Catherine?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we'll add those to our wish list.
And with the shuffled agenda, I think that's everything, but let me just run through it here quick. Operating capital adjourned. Yeah.
I think the hour has arrived.
It is.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Ramsey will move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was a long evening, but I think we got a lot of things done. Thanks for your attention and your input.
Very good. Thank you all.
All
Good night.
right.
Good night.
Have a good night.
See you in a
Good night,
couple of
everybody.
weeks. So long.
Bye.
Still recording apparently.